Hello and thank you so much for joining me today. I'm Sherry Taylor, freelance dietitian, nutritionist, and the director of Eat Great, Feel Great. And today's video is on my top 3 tips for how to wade your way through the barrage of nutrition information that's available in the media and on the internet. I've come across so many people this week that have come in so thoroughly confused after spending months, if not years, trying to research their particular health issue or health condition all on their own without any support. And after reading hundreds and hundreds of articles that are all completely contradictory, they come in so thoroughly confused and actually even terrified about not knowing what they should and shouldn't be eating. And it's so incredibly sad to see. So I thought I would do a video today on my top 3 tips on how to make your way through all of that nutrition information. Because the reality is not all of it is right and not all of it applies to you. And so how do you separate nutrition fact from fiction? And how do you figure out what you should be acting on and what you shouldn't? So here is some advice. Number 1 would be incredibly selective and careful where you get your nutrition information from. Unfortunately, the reality of the internet is that anyone can develop a website, anyone can start writing a blog, whether they have any understanding of science or nutrition or not. And that doesn't seem to stop them from presenting some fairly strong opinions about what they think other people should and shouldn't be eating. It doesn't mean you should believe it. It doesn't mean it applies to you, but that doesn't stop them from sharing their information. So you need to be incredibly selective on the information that you actually pay attention to. So let me give you some advice. There are 3 websites that I would recommend as kind of my go-to ones if I was looking for nutrition advice. I'm sure there are many others that are equally as good, but these happen to be the ones that I like. 2 are based in the US and 1 is based in the UK. The first is the Berkeley Wellness Letter, based out of the University of California at Berkeley. And I really like it because it's fairly cutting edge in terms of what's hot in the nutrition field, what are the current trends, what's the current research saying, what's in the media. And they give a fantastic, very scientific, but understandable overview of the information, and at the end tell you whether or how to apply the information to yourself. So that one is actually my favorite, if I'm honest. Number 2 is the Tufts University Health and Nutrition Letter. Same thing, based out of a university, very science-based, but written at a very practical level, completely unbiased, and they try and stay on top of what the current health and nutrition trends are. And number 3 would be the British Dietetic Association. They have all sorts of fact sheets on their website that you can download free of charge and start applying, a lot of the nutrition tips to your particular health situation. So that would be my first tip, is be very selective where you get your nutrition information from. Number 2 is you need to somewhat restrict or limit the number of sources that you refer to when it comes to nutrition information. Otherwise, you're going to be so overwhelmed with so much information that you're actually going to end up doing nothing with it because you're just completely overwhelmed. And I have to do that too. I mean, there are scientific articles coming out every minute of every day virtually. If I read every single one of them, I would never get anything else done. So you do need to kind of prioritize and be somewhat strategic in terms of where you get your nutrition information from. So I tend to use the rule of 3. Which means that I need to see a particular piece of advice from 3 independent, reliable sources before I will start paying attention to it, before I do a bit of research into it myself, but certainly before I start applying it, okay? So if one study says something, I may park that in the back of my mind, but I certainly wouldn't be acting on it, and you shouldn't be either. Because no matter how good a researcher is, no matter how well designed a study is, there are always biases. There are always unique situations that we can't explain why the results are the way that they are, okay? So science in general will always say at the end of article, we need more research into this particular area, because, we found it with this particular target population, but we can't say for sure whether this information applies to a different population, for example. Okay, so I always use the rule of 3. So I need to hear it from 3 independent, reliable sources before I'll even pay very much attention, if I'm honest. And that will be so helpful for you in terms of wading through all of the nutrition information that's out there. Because the media likes to make headlines. The media likes to shock you. So they will pick some obscure random study and promote it in the paper, for example, or on their blog. But if nobody else comes to the same conclusion, if there hasn't been any other studies on it, I think it's a bit premature to be acting on it. So that would be my suggestion. And number 3 is please see a dietitian. The whole purpose of the dietetics profession is that we have been trained as health professionals to sort through all of the research that's available, to know what's more reliable and what's less reliable, and what do you do when the information is all conflicting. We have been trained specifically for that purpose. And it's our job then to translate all of that scientific information into advice that's helpful and applicable to your unique health situation. So if you haven't already done so, I really encourage you to see a dietitian. Now, if you feel that I'm biased and you don't want to see me, that's totally fine. Please go on the Freelance Dietitians website. You will find dietitians all over the country that are all equally qualified to be giving you reliable, scientific-based health advice, okay? Now, there is a huge, huge difference between a nutritionist and a dietitian. So a nutritionist is a completely unregulated title in the UK. That means anyone can call themselves a nutritionist, whether they have any training or credentials in health and nutrition or not. Whereas a dietitian must have a degree, we must have met certain criteria, we must have completed a practicum, and we are registered and governed by the Health and Care Professions Council. So the quality of the advice that we give is much more scientifically based and much more reliable as a result of that. So that would be my 3rd piece of advice, would be to see a dietitian. So then to recap, number 1 is be very, very selective of where you get your nutrition information from. Number 2 is to somewhat limit so that you don't become overwhelmed. So limit the sources of nutrition information that you refer to. And you may want to use the rule of 3 so that unless you hear it from 3 independent, reliable sources, I tend to not get too worked up about it. And number 3 is please see a dietitian. We are trained in translating the science around health and nutrition into practical advice. So I hope that's been helpful. If there's anything I can do to help, please leave a comment below or ping me an email. And I look forward to talking to you again very soon. Take care.